Good evening, everyone. Firstly, my name's Karina Haythorpe. I'm the Federal President of the Australian Education Union, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining this webinar tonight here from Ghana country in the beautiful Adelaide Plains, and acknowledge the elders past and present of this wonderful land, and also acknowledge their spiritual and cultural connections to this country. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd also like to acknowledge the elders from the country on which you're joining us tonight for this webinar. And can I encourage you to give an acknowledgement of country in the chat function? Now that we've got that working, we'd like to know who we have on board with our webinar tonight. So colleagues, in the language of the Ghana people, whose land I'm on, Ninamani, hello. Welcome to our Teaching First Languages in Schools webinar, which the AEU is delighted to be co-hosting with First Languages Australia. I extend very warm greetings at this time to our colleagues from FLA, Faith and Melinda, welcome. We look forward to hearing your important contribution to our panel tonight and to growing the partnership between our organisations in the implementation of our shared policy objectives on the teaching and learning of first languages in Australia's schools. While we must be clear-eyed about the extent and the shape of the work to be done to ensure that First Peoples can speak, learn, share, develop and benefit from the teaching and learning of first languages when and if so they choose, we must also acknowledge how far we have come. It was not too long ago in Australia where education systems and consequently teachers were actively engaged in the suppression of first language speaking and speakers in schools across the country. Indeed, one of the many examples from recent history was from 2008, when the Northern Territory government introduced the first 4 hours of English policy, mandating the first 4 hours of the school day be taught in English only. Aboriginal members of the AEU Northern Territory branch contacted the union, incensed that the government could attempt to impose such a policy, but impose it they did. So the AEU's Aboriginal members joined together with their communities and with union support, developed the Don't Cut Off Our Tongues campaign. Members, particularly those in the Territory's bilingual schools, resisted the imposition of this policy, and members across the country called for its abolition. Eventually, success was achieved when the policy was quietly abolished in 2013. So while our discussion tonight is not focused on bilingual schools, the point of my anecdote is that it is the collective strength, the advocacy and the leadership of First Nations peoples which has put and kept the vision of high quality teaching and learning of first languages in schools firmly on the education agenda in this country. And I want to particularly acknowledge Ellie, Tanil and Glenn at this point, and thank you for your work and your contribution to your union. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about your work tonight. Judging by the interest in tonight's webinar, we've put together a timely and a topical event, and given the complexities and challenges that we confront in achieving our policy objectives, I expect that this is the beginning of many such conversations we'll be having in the future. I'd now like to hand over to Darcel to kick off our webinar. Thank you, Darcel.
Thank you, Karina. My name is Darcel Russell. I'm a Gurrumpul woman from Minjerribah, North Stradbroke Island. I'm living and working on Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the old people all around the country and bring respects to my old people to all of you here on this webinar. Particularly pay my respects to my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues. This webinar is, the topic of this webinar is very close to my heart because my grandmother was the last person, the last generation of my family who was exposed to elders who spoke language. My grandmother grew up on Maora Mission at Stradbroke Island, and in her generation, they were punished. They went to Maora Mission School and they were punished for speaking language. Grandmother tells me the story, or told me the story when she was alive. of the story of the grannies on the mission taking the children down to the creek at night time and lighting cool fires and teaching those kids to sing language songs in language quietly so they never got caught. Because if they got caught, the punishment, that punishment would be either the head shaved or being made hair sugar bags from Hessian bag, or for people who were labelled completely recalcitrant, often people were taken away to places like Cherbourg or Palm Island. So my community has been undergoing a language revival program for a long time, and there have been a lot of people who have contributed to waking our sleeping language up. I don't use the word dying languages. I say that my language is asleep and it's waiting for people to come and breathe life into it again through speaking it. We have been undertaking revival programs. Our elders have been generously involved in that. And without any further ado, I guess this is why that topic is so close to my heart. And I'd like to hand over to Faith and Melinda to tell us about the fantastic work that they are doing at First Languages Australia. Thank you very much.
Faith, we just need you to unmute.
Jingiwala Jimbalang, Nanyanati Faith Baisden, and I'm the manager of First Languages Australia. I'm speaking from Quandamooka country in southeast Queensland tonight, Darcel. My own family language is Yugambeh, and our country is just to the south of Brisbane. I'm with Melinda Holden, and I'll ask Melinda to introduce herself.
Melinda, unmute.
Okay. Yigi Newlam, Burungini Ngai, Jandi, Bundabara, Tarablang, Gurang, and Warragamagan, Mitham Nai. I've just said hello everyone. My language name is Burungini, meaning thunder or storm, which many of my family always mumbles, suit you to the ground. Or here comes the storm in a teacup. So I'm noted for being rather loud like a storm. I am a Tarablang, Gurang and Warragamay woman. I live in Bundaberg, which is the Tarablang country. My interest in our languages span over 30 years, and I'm a director of the First Languages Australia Committee, and my interest lies in the education and training portfolio.
Thanks, Melinda. And thanks everyone here for the invitation to talk about all the work being done on the development of the national strategy for the teaching of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages. Since the rollout in 2016 of the officially titled National Curriculum Framework for Teaching of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Languages, which I'll just call the framework after this, the training of first has been identified as a high priority. We've been commissioned by the Department of Education, Skills and Employment to develop over 3 years the national strategy that will guide the training of teachers and the development of resources. This is to boost the long-term uptake of teaching of our languages in Australian schools. And it comes on the back of previous work by our organisation with the Departments of Education in each state and territory to document their approaches to the teaching of first languages. We found that all of their approaches have been completely diverse and uncoordinated up to that point. And one strength of this current project has been to see how the consultation process itself is leading to sharing of ideas between the jurisdictions. Our report's called Nintaringanyi, and we'll give you the link to it along with other information at the end of the meeting. The national strategy development has 3 components. Firstly, working with each state and territory to report on the implementation, the rollout and uptake of the framework. Secondly, identifying the professional development needs and opportunities for those who wish to teach their languages. And thirdly, the development of the language education workforce strategy. This includes identifying appropriate pay rates, conditions, and career pathways for first language instructors. Now, Melinda is someone who's able to give us a unique insight into all aspects of this project. She has personally created effective and fun community language projects. She's led research to reinvigorate languages that were thought to be lost. She's created and delivered formal language teaching programs that have been shared with schools in the Bundaberg region. And she's also co-creator with her sister, Bridget Pryman, of the Gambay Languages Map. And if anyone hasn't seen the Gambay map, I hope after the meeting that you have a chance to visit the site, and I know that you'll be amazed. But now Melinda will want me to stop talking about her. And instead, I ask you, Melinda, to tell us what you see as the issues around engaging community language teachers in schools around their pay rates and conditions.
Yes, well, this has always been one of the topics that we haven't quite been able to deal with because it takes a lot of involvement with other departments. So the issue is that there is nothing available for schools to access and to provide a clear pay scale. Right? How to measure the value of the work and the knowledge that our elders, community advisors and teacher aides contribute to delivering languages and culture to each school. To also acknowledge and appreciate the value added for Indigenous teachers in teaching Indigenous languages in the schools. And that is why it is important to pursue the possibilities of an Indigenous knowledge sector within the union specialising in Aboriginal employment.
And what about, we hear often the issue of schools not being able to afford to have a community language teacher as well as a trained teacher in the classroom, because you have to have the trained teacher to support the community teacher. What can we do about making sure that we have more trained, qualified teachers to be able to teach independently in the classrooms?
Yeah, it would be so great, wouldn't it? But like with all careers, such as teachers, it's common for them to increase their skills in different areas of education. So therefore, it would be similar for Indigenous language, to do the same for Indigenous languages and culture. So to go out and upskill their knowledge about Indigenous languages. The Sydney University runs the MILE course, which is Masters of Indigenous Education, Language Education. I'm not sure, but all you have to do is go online and have a look at that. But I know of many teachers that have gone on and qualified themselves, particularly with Indigenous languages through that school, through that university. Language centres also offer many of their reference group members the opportunity to be trained as qualified language workers. Those language workers can then work in the schools. But like I say, it's not a formal arrangement. And this is what we're lacking, is formal arrangements in all of this process. Long-term Indigenous language could be a pathway to our students becoming linguists and teachers specialising in the Indigenous languages and culture. So there's all those sorts of things that we could think about, but it's very hard to think about those things one-off all the time. We just need a national approach to this sort of thing.
And I think what we have to do is try and really harness and bring together that group of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander qualified teachers who are there, and sort of find a way that they can not easily, but without too much extra work, get the skills to then go on and become a language teacher as well as the regular teaching skills that they already have. So I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's finding those pathways.
That's right.
And because I think this has come about fairly quickly with the rollout of the curriculum, 2016, there's this sudden need that everyone's saying, where are these language teachers? Because if a community decides that it wants to teach the language, we need the language teachers to be community people. It's not like we're going to hand them over to the non-Indigenous teachers and just go, here's the text, you start teaching the language. So this is the real, one of the real concerns is how we can build up that bank of qualified language teachers. And I think the work that we're doing through the strategy is pointing to the need for multiple pathways and multiple entry levels,
That's right.
Universities at TAFEs so that they'll help us, innovate here. We've got to create something new.
That's right.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the experience that you've had, like you've created books and grammars, but, you've done this thing with the digital, the smart screen classes, and created these programs that you've shared with the Department of Education around the area of Bundy. But how does a language centre go about charging for the programs and the resources that they've produced? Because I think this is a question that's coming up everywhere now. The education department is coming along and saying, we need your information and your help. How do we charge?
Well, our language centres right across Australia, they all have very big hearts. They're there's that passionate about reviving their languages and reclaiming them and training elders and the likes to know their language. But because all of this has come before the, what does it say? The cart before the horse, the horse before the cart. Yeah. It's really hard because, we find it very difficult to know how to charge. All we're skilled in is being able to produce a lesson, a language lesson for the schools. Yeah. We're happy to do that. Yeah. And this great opportunity that we sort of had offered to us was the Adobe program, where we could be a virtual classroom. So having the young language workers in the language centre beam out to schools their language program, particularly with one of the high schools, they actually introduced the subject as a proper subject for a whole term, so many times a week. Yes, so that's been a great opportunity for us. And then they also go around and teach the babies too at the daycares and that. But we still don't charge because we don't know how to do it.
No.
So I think a lot of people are in that situation. They, if they were able to charge, they could then manifest all that money back in and train other people.
Yeah.
So I think.
Sorry, go.
Yeah. No, I just think that's something that's really needed for language centres to know how, and individual consultants to know how exactly do they charge their services out.
Yeah. I think if we could ask anyone here, if you have the interest to stay in touch with us afterwards, because you might have experience in other languages. I know that we're working with the National Languages Plan. It was really interesting for me to be in a meeting with the teachers of all the other languages and to hear a lot of them saying they have the same issues about producing resources and ownership of materials and everything. So if you've had experience in your school with other language communities charging for their resources and you can help us with some examples, we're going to say keep in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, we would certainly love to hear that. So because there is no standard pricing available and it's very hard for people that are not skilled in that financial business. So it's very hard.
Yeah, it's a fast learning curve that we're all on, really. And just before we use up all of our time, can we talk about an issue that often comes up, and that's about where the principal, you might have the community saying, we're really keen to implement the program. You might have teachers that are keen to talk about it, but you have principals who, for one reason or another, are holding back. And I think oftentimes we find that it's because they don't want to do the wrong thing and they don't want to upset anyone. But Melinda, what advice, what can we say to help with that situation?
Well, this is a long cry of the principals, and the elders. They never are able to get together, and that's the important thing, is for the principal to know how to engage with the elders and the community. And also taking into account, who's going to teach it and all that. But most of our languages now, and our language groups that have had their language reclaimed, they are happy. They're happy to do that. But, some of the teachers come to us and they say, oh, we'd like this in our schools, but how do we go about it? And then they've got the hurdle of going to the principal.
Yes.
And that is the big issue, is the principal. And I
really, principals on the meeting, don't get too rough.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. But it's very difficult for them to, and I don't believe that really is an excuse, because many of the states, and particularly in Queensland, we've had documents for principal guidelines, how to install a language program, what are the protocols. So, and it's there, it's available to everybody. But like you say, it's in a too hard basket, and it's,
Yeah, or they're not wanting to do the wrong thing.
No, that's right.
Too.
Yeah,
so I guess, we just encourage people to look for guidelines and come to us if they want any advice, if they're not sure of what's happening in their own state.
That's right. And one of the things I always say is to people that want to put language in the schools, it's so important that you teach the language of the land on which the school is situated, because it's very important, because your language describes your land and your culture. So that's why it's so important. And if it's not available, discuss it with the neighbouring language to put it in.
And that's also going to be an issue for, say, an Aboriginal teacher who gets that extra qualification to be a language teacher, but there still will have to be permissions and consultation and invitation by the local community to accept that responsibility of teaching the local language.
And that's where the community people, the advisors and that would be coming in to assist, and that's another expense, so to think, to pay those people to be in that room, so we could get this, get the languages taught. So, but we teach all the other languages from around the country, from around the world. So I believe that we should be doing it. They should be teaching our languages.
Yes. Absolutely. I think we've probably taken up our allotted time, but happy to chat if questions. I see a couple of good questions coming up for later anyway. But just to let you know that the report from the first stage of the strategy, that's the report about how the implementation of the framework is actually happening. That's just about signed off and ready for distribution, if anyone's interested in seeing that. And also we'll give you links to those other documents that I talked about and to the Gambay website. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faith and Melinda. Could I just get you to put both your microphones on mute again, please, if that's all right? And thank you very much. It was very interesting, all of the different issues that you traversed. And I think that, in fact, the teacher panelist members who are here are experiencing in real life some of the very issues that you've just spoken about in their roles variously as teachers and coordinators of language teaching across different states and territories. So, look, without further ado, I think I'm going to go alphabetically and going to introduce everybody to Eleanor. Well, let Eleanor introduce herself, in fact. But greetings, Eleanor. Thank you so much. We're very, very keen to hear what you've got to say and very pleased that you're joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Darcel. I will attempt to share my screen. Can everyone see that? Silence. Darcel, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yep.
Thanks. I speak to you today on Ngunnawal country, and before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge country in the language generously gifted to me by the Ngunnawal elders. Dawura Nuna, Dawura Ngunnawal, Yangu Nyalawiri Duni Manyan, Ngunnawal Wari, Dawura Wari, Ningada Dindi, Wangarali Jijin. I meet today on Ngunnawal land. This is Ngunnawal country, and I pay my respects to female elders and male elders. Always was, always will be, Ngunnawal country. The language that comes from this country tells us that every time we take a step. I speak these words to this country and acknowledge the elders of this land, past, present, and future. This is not my country, and I acknowledge the blessing and honour I have every day to walk, teach, learn, and live on your land. You are the original educators, teachers, and caretakers of this place we now call Canberra. Yulma everyone, hello in Ngunnawal, ya, hello in my language, Palawakani. I'm a Palawa woman with connections to Oyster Bay and Ben Lomond country in northeast Lutruwita, aka Tasmania. And in my language, which I acknowledge is not of this country that I am on, first and foremost, I say ya Pulingina, hello, welcome. I am a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, an auntie, an artist, a teacher. I acknowledge my matriarch, my Nana Patsy, and my mother and my auntie who are here today with me. I acknowledge all elders and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their elders, as well as our non-Indigenous allies. I am currently the proud teacher of 2 classes of Year 11 and 12 young Aboriginal and non-Indigenous students studying the first ever tertiary major in Indigenous cultures and languages in the ACT. As well as teaching this course, I teach in design and technology, and I also have the blessing of being the pastoral care teacher for all our Koori students at my college, at which this stage is 29 inspiring young mob. Unlike the rest of this amazing panel here tonight, of which I am extremely humbled to be a part of, I don't have the right nor education to teach First Nations language on the lands on which I work. I am young-ish and Palawa, teaching and living off country. I speak tiny pockets of my own language and Ngunnawal in its revitalised stage as gifted to me. Instead, the course I teach sits within the Humanities Framework. The course concentrates on the complexities and interdependent relationship between language and country, well-being, identity, and culture. I aim to have as many blackfellas in the classroom as possible with a different guest speaker every Friday in my first unit, Communities, Cultures and Identities. The course goes on to develop students' understanding of connection to country, kinship, history, representations and perspectives, social justice, law, language and well-being, ways of knowing, being and doing, and much more. I also look at the whole structure of the course itself as an opportunity to challenge the Western narrative of education and the fast-paced, cram-it-all-in-there way of doing things. I'm really more of a facilitator than a teacher in my own head, and learn from and with students, trying to be outside on country, have as many diverse voices and perspectives in the classroom, and engage in content through an inquiry and project-based framework as much as possible. Community voice and consultation and cultural sensitivity is built into every rubric, and generally students form the structure of each assessment task together and alongside me. At the moment, my Year 12 students are working on language loss and revitalization, and my Koori students in the class are predominantly working on their own connection to language and culture, and completing projects ranging from embedding language into curriculum learning areas, early childhood, back on country, through digital technologies, to things like looking at globally at First Nations languages and mapping out their own community progress in this space. Their last project saw them engaging in real-life community-based projects, rewriting curriculum for our local outdoor school Biragai, which means laughter in Ngunnawal language, and changing the current culturally inappropriate on-country experience called early settlers to one that involved Ngunnawal voice and perspective. This project is one I am most proud of my Deadly students' voice being cemented in curriculum eventually for all Year 3 to 5 students visiting camps in Canberra. My Year 11s are currently studying First Nations voice throughout history in a colonial world and understanding those heroes who have paved the way for them as young mob now. All students have a reflective journal that is part of their assessment and work collaboratively and in groups as much as possible. In my second lesson ever, now 18 months ago, one of my non-Indigenous 17-year-olds put up her hand quite abruptly and said, sorry, Ellie, but how come this is the first time in my entire education that I'm learning the true Aboriginal history from a First Nations person, thus solidifying my honour and passion to teach in this space. It's been a lot of work, a lot of time unpaid, working late nights, away from my kids, yarning with community, parents and elders. Overall, the thing I struggle most with is the idea that I'm a single voice and in a space where I feel unnatural to the way I have been my whole life. Teaching in a Western world is very much solo, isolating and hierarchical. This is not the way we generally operate as Aboriginal people, and definitely not the way I operate. So I remind myself every day the privilege I have in this space and obligation I have to ask, acknowledge this, and push my students to not see this tiny piece of content knowledge as anything but a small start. I acknowledge my amazing students as they teach me so much every day, and honestly are beautiful human beings. I am so lucky. So on that note, I am hopeful and have been assured that this is a space in which to talk about some of the many complexities in this vast teaching area, as Annie Melinda started to, including the lack of resources, the lack of cultural awareness and community consultation, the idea of the one narrative for all Aboriginal people, adequate pay and acknowledgement for precious knowledge provided by elders and community, the lack of funding for proper community engagement and involvement, the time, and the list goes on. This is also a great forum to talk about the immense positives and vital need for this content in our curriculum. As part of this Speaking the Truth, I will take you back to 4 years ago when the beginning of this course was as I know it now. Imagine a very heavily pregnant, 8.5 months to be exact, me, already on maternity leave, but determined to complete the curriculum writing process for the new Indigenous languages course. My wonderful Uncle Wol refers to this story as a war story, one that is traumatic and may be seen as negative or blaming. But I hope in this forum draws light to some of the challenges we as First Nations educators can face. So the way that we write curriculum here in the ACT is our curriculum board put out an EOI to all interested teachers to be on a writing panel, and then those chosen teachers sit together for 5 days with the curriculum mob and write the structure of the course. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but that's the summary. So when the EOI came out for this new course in Indigenous languages, as a young Aboriginal teacher, I was keen to know more. Initially, the workshops included our Aboriginal education section, many linguists from IATSIS, a whole bunch of experts. But after a few hours, all these people drifted away, and I was left as the solo Aboriginal person in the room. And I might point out, not an Ngunnawal person. So many things that were red flags for me were nothing or hidden to the others in the room. The first and most distressing one to me was that originally this course was proposed as an Indigenous languages course, like a subject that sits within a languages framework with foreign languages, Japanese, French, etc. and a course that picks and chooses bits and pieces of different Australian First Nations languages and compares them and examines little tidbits here and there. Other things included cultural awareness and the order of the unit structures to encapsulate this for those non-Indigenous students who have been denied any learning of this sort, and how to navigate this for culturally strong Indigenous students at the same time. After many arguments and unfortunately emotional pregnant lady tears regarding many aspects of course content, as well as in the end the whole process of this curriculum development in this templated environment, the other wonderful educators on the panel supported me in my attempted resignation. I did not want to be involved with any of this without proper community consultation or proper protocol. To the credit of those in the room, I got through in some way, and prior to public consultation, the course was mandated to go to community and to the Ngunnawal Elders Council, as well as Ngunnawal elders and educators. Following this same process, but with my own cultural protocols in place and ways of being and doing, I asked the Auntie's blessing to teach this course 2 years later, and have now almost completed the first college course of 4 semesters to complete the tertiary major. So as a teacher, I feel it is necessary to go beyond respect and acknowledgement of Aboriginal perspectives and actually incorporate culturally appropriate and relevant practices and material into our daily teaching, and not just in these specific courses. For far too long, the Australian school system has marginalised Aboriginal people and trapped them in a cycle of educational and economical disadvantage. It is undeniable that over the past 200 years, Aboriginal people have experienced education under a number of racist policies aimed at the exclusion, segregation, forced removal and assimilation of their people, culture and language. Winnan Atkinson's research talks about this thing called educational debt. For many Indigenous Australians, formal education has either been absent or has involved emptying out their own cultural heritage, an experience of loss and division rather than growth. What is called an achievement gap between students' populations is actually a measure of educational debt incurred through past deficits that have been historically and systemically incurred through social exclusion and poverty. Regarding historical debt and intergenerational trauma, Indigenous Australian children carry with them the educational and trauma debts of their parents, grandparents, and communities. So when Indigenous Australian children step into their classroom, this is the baggage they may bring with them. Self-determination, genuine and First Nations-led cultural perspectives in the classroom, Aboriginal teachers and LSAs, cultural awareness and proper real understanding of our nation's history are just some of the ways forward. The main one is to start with this instead of with the curriculum. Before literacy, before numeracy, it actually doesn't negatively affect anything you do. But if you start first with cultural perspectives and contents, do it well, research, ask questions, invite community in, and then add your content in, nothing changes. Except it really does. It's no longer an add-on that you're uncomfortable trying to tag on. As my auntie always tells me, but we felt uncomfortable in our own country for 230 years. It's okay for other people to feel that feeling of discomfort alongside us now. We can guide them. When you are learning something new, you always feel that discomfort. Unfortunately for First Nations people, this was a forced feeling. I have many goals in this space, but the main one is that one day soon, this will be seen as the most vital content knowledge for all Australian students. There is definitely a shift in this space, but is it big enough to right the wrongs of our educational past? Every student in the ACT college system is currently mandated to study English. Not long ago, they were mandated to study maths and English. Imagine if students' educational packages automatically included Indigenous cultures and languages, or a First Nations language of that country. Imagine. Thank you, Yara.
Thank you, Ali. That's a very awesome presentation. I'd ask participants out there if you've got any questions on the chat as our panelists are going, please put them up. I think Karina's monitoring them, and we'll be asking questions later and giving people. But maybe people are saving them all up for later. But we're happy to hear your comments as well, please. Without any further ado, Peniel is from Queensland. She's also teaching languages, and she has a very different but nevertheless just as interesting story. So thank you very much, Janelle.
Ayinda, thank you. So for those people who don't know me, my name is Tennille Bainbridge, and I'm a Gungri, Wodjolang, Kunya, Polish and Scottish woman. So Tennille Bainbridge, Nari Naju Naya, Gungri, Polish, Kunya, Wodjolang, Scottish Naya. I'd first just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians whose land I'm on here. Yimbana Naya Ilana Dandigu Gubbi Gubbi. So I know and respect this is Gubbi Gubbi land. Yimbana Naya Mundana Ilana Dandi. I know and respect the people of this land. Yimbana Naya Waduran Maunigu Macha. I know and respect the elders of a long time ago. So I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on Gubbi Gubbi country, and I work on Gubbi Gubbi country and on my country, which is Gungri country. I'd just like to give you a little bit of background. I guess my journey. A couple of years ago, I was actually searching online for information about my Gungri family history, and an auntie who I was chatting with at the time passed on a word to me in language. And having grown up with English as my only language, I felt that I needed to find out, the origins of this Gungri word to help me better understand like a number of family stories. And from searching for the meaning of that one word, my curiosity for Gungri language really started to grow. And as I carried out more of my own research, it became apparent of just how little of it is, being spoken nowadays. So you're probably already aware that less than 2% of schools in Queensland currently have a formal teaching program for Indigenous language. And with only a handful of fluent Gungri speakers around today, it was very apparent to me that I had a role to play in keeping the Gungri language alive and helping people to understand the meaning and the importance. So I've enrolled in further study, and one of the requirements of my further study was there was a teaching component, and I decided to do that teaching component on country. So in October last year, I travelled from my home on the Sunshine Coast to the Western Downs district of the Maranoa region in Queensland. So that's probably about 7.5 to 8 hours away. And so that was so that I could complete my required teaching hours. And since that time, I've returned 4 times to country. I was really hooked from my first visit. It wasn't my first visit to country, but it was my first visit teaching on country, and hearing about the hard work that Auntie Irene Ryder had undertaken in the area to establish a formal language learning program in the local schools, and then seeing the effort of an uncle and what he was putting into the delivery of those programs, really motivated me to keep going back. So I now visit 4 schools across Mitchell and Roma each term to deliver Gungri language lessons to Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal students from prep to year 10. And as we all know, kids love to have fun, and that element is, central to the way that we deliver lessons. So painting, drawing and singing in language are very much a part of what we do with students, and it's been terrific to see, you know, how much enjoyment they get from the program. Also, we've been recently awarded a First Languages Australia grant to help expand our language teaching in the wider community. So I guess for me, the next step is, or the next important step is to build the capacity of these communities, or my community, to continue teaching Gungri language into the future. So that's my journey. I'll just share my screen. I'm a novice when it comes to Zoom, so just give me a second. Hopefully this works. If you can give me a thumbs up or a wave so I know that you can see it. Thanks. Okay, so this is a beautiful Gungri country. So this is region Southwest Queensland, includes the landscape of the local government boundaries of the Maranoa Shire Council. So particularly the towns Mitchell, Amby, Dunkeld, Mangalala. So we're talking about this region here. Neighbouring language groups are Bidra, Manandangi, which the three languages are all very similar. And this is the beautiful Maranoa River. As I mentioned, the language, I just want to give you a little bit more detail about the language program. So the language that's taught is the language of the country, so Gungri. What makes it really easy, or why it's really easy to teach Gungri on Gungri country, is because we have native title and there is no conflict in the community. So another thing that makes it really easy is Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. There's been a lot of intermarriages, and that also, I guess that's so the community are really supportive of the language. Some of the language is spoken by adults and children, but not by all. And English is the language spoken in general by the community, and is also the first language of most of the students there. We teach language perspectives because I'm not based there all the time. That is the only option. So we look at what the kids are learning and we build on that. So for example, if they're learning about family, well, we would look at, Gungri family terms. We predominantly deliver to primary schools, and they have a language lesson per term, which is scheduled into the school timetable. The kids are taught by 2 teacher linguists, so I'm always with an uncle when I go into the classroom. And what's really great about that is I'm a woman, he's a man, so we can also split and deliver lessons that are tailored towards, girls and boys. One school that we visit actually employs a Gungri teacher aide, and she builds on the work that we do. She delivers the language lessons weekly, fortnightly. Language perspectives are also taught with a focus on listening and speaking, cultural knowledge and learning about the language. So we're not really focusing on writing. However, we do encourage the older kids to write words and sentences, as you can see in the picture there. So Yugani is to be cloudy, or it is cloudy is the translation there. So yeah, a lot of our techniques or our teaching methods, we use what it's called TPR, which is total physical response. So that method gets children talking in language straight away for a communicative purpose. And if you're unsure of any of these terms, please pull me up or put them in the chat. Yeah. As far as staffing and resources are concerned, the schools do not receive any funding for the delivery of the language perspectives, and nor do we. A significant number of resources have been developed over a long period of time that's available for use for both school and community. And these resources include unit plans, community word lists, which support the delivery. There's also a range of visual and print resources. As far as professional learning, the teacher linguist, that's myself and Uncle, we run community workshops. However, there isn't any professional development or further training offered in Queensland that I'm aware of. All my study has been done through New South Wales. Yeah. Some of the strengths and opportunities of the language program or language perspectives. Quality curriculum resources have been developed and have been delivered. There's really high rates of engagement. The program's been hailed a success and is now being used as a blueprint for other outback schools. And therefore, I guess the kids are also getting better academic results. There's stronger community engagement between the school and the community. And the students have developed a stronger sense of belonging, and that's led to better engagement and less behavioural problems. It's really noticeable. We actually were, as I mentioned before, we were recently awarded a First Language Australia grant to help expand the language teaching to the wider community. But also, I guess another achievement of ours is we had the ABC visit, and they did a little news story. And I'd just like to share. Do I have time to share? Yeah? Okay. I'm a novice, so just hold on. I just need to do a new share. Might not be able to get it up. I think I need to stop the share. 1 second. See how this goes. Okay. This one here. Can you hear that? No. Okay. One moment. Let's try again. Okay. Try again. So this is the school that this is one school that I teach at. So we visit Catholic or independent schools and public schools.
It's just past lunch in the outback town of Mitchell, where students are looking forward to their favourite class of the week. Here at St Patrick's, children as young as 5 have been busy learning their region's original tongue.
It was the main language of our town before English came along.
We can talk to Aboriginal people, so even if they don't talk English, we could talk Aboriginal to them.
Goongarri is an endangered language. Auntie Lynette Nixon is one of just 3 remaining native speakers.
Sometimes I'm just so proud I could almost cry. People used to be ashamed to be Aboriginal and ashamed to speak language. Well, they now feel proud.
Less than 2% of Queensland schools teach a structured Indigenous language program, but educational consultant Des Crump says momentum is growing for more schools to follow suit.
Probably fielded about 7 or 8 queries, direct queries about other schools across the diocese wanting to set up a similar program.
He says the program has resulted in improved academic results, stronger community engagement and fewer behavioural issues. The Goongarri language, spoken here in Queensland's Maranoa region, is one of countless Indigenous dialects undergoing a major revival process. There were once more than 150 Indigenous languages spoken across Queensland. Today, less than 20 are spoken as a first language. Auntie Lynette is also compiling the first Goongarri dictionary.
every child should learn it, everybody should know it, because they're living on this country as well, and that's how you grow respect for the country.
Phoebe Hosier, ABC News, Mitchell.
Okay. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. I'll just go back. There's probably an easier way to do it. Sorry. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that snippet. I think that's a really big achievement for our community, and it's one that, you know, makes me feel incredibly proud, and, you know, I feel like we're on the right track. See if I can, but there's also, you know, some weaknesses and threats. The program's vulnerable, especially if there's a change of leadership in schools, and there tends to be a high turnover of staff in schools in regional settings. But I guess the same could be said for schools in a metropolitan setting. Gungri country, as I mentioned before, 7 hours away from my residence. So I hold a full-time teaching position on the Sunshine Coast. So my principal actually allows me to take leave. A lot of the time I take long service leave because I can't afford to not, but I do worry about when I run out of long service leave. The opportunity's been valuable, but it's been really difficult to build on what, you know, we've been doing, because it's, you know, it's so long between visits. Another factor that impacts our ability to practice on country is also the associated costs with visits, such as fuel, car hire, accommodation and food. Sometimes I'm out of pocket $2,400. Not that I'm complaining, but it is something that I need to budget for. We're also limited in terms of what we can achieve, because both of us, as I previously mentioned, hold the full-time positions in other jobs. But on a larger long-term scale, there certainly needs to be, you know, some strategy, a process or a plan to look at resourcing. It comes down to resources and having, you know, people in the community to teach and speak the language. And it also has a lot to do with the principal, because they make the final, you know, decision on what the curriculum looks like. And as Arnie Lynette mentioned, federal and state governments need to make the protection of Indigenous languages, you know, a priority. And a lot of schools just don't have the resources, so they don't have, you know, they can't pay for my TRS, but nor can my school. So I guess also we need flexible working arrangements for people who, like myself, can't move back to country full time, but want to go out and teach on country and continue to upskill, you know, community and the teachers out there. When it comes to policy, I guess there's minimal language policy that exists, or if it, yeah, there is, but it obviously does exist. However, there's, you know, lack of planning, coordination for language revitalization, so it can make it really, really difficult to build on the achievement of others and, you know, advance the process. And policy is not sufficient to ensure language survive, you know, a language survives and flourishes. You know, it needs a lot more than that. And a productive area of policy and planning by governments has been the development of syllabuses and curriculum for language education in schools. You know, that's a really positive step. But there's no obvious professional and career development pathway to achieve this in Queensland. You know, I see, you know, New South Wales, you know, they're training up language teachers, you know, but I don't see that happening here in Queensland, and I don't know where the money is, you know, for that. Yeah. So I might just leave it there, but that's my journey over the last couple of years, and yeah, I just wish it was something that I could do full time.
Thanks to Neil. That's excellent. Can I ask you to take your screen off share, please? Okay. Thank you. That's wonderful. Neil's just mentioned New South Wales and the systems and structures that are available to the teaching profession in New South Wales. So it's a good segue into Glenn's presentation, who is from New South Wales and coordinating a lot of this work in the northern corner of New South Wales. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Glenn. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Darcel. Jingiwala, everybody, and was it lady that southeast and Queensland? We have the same language. Just the white man put a border between us, so we're all Bundjalung. Sorry, Faith. Yugambeh is part of Bundjalung. In Bundjalung originally, and I live and I grew up here around here. My dad is Bundjalung. My mother is Dangari, which is south of us. It's Gumbanga is between us and Dangari. I grew up on an Aboriginal community as a kid, Cabbage Tree Island, if you might know where that is. It's not a tropical island. It's a river island, which it was a refuge for Aboriginal people back in the 1800s. And I'm the descendant of the elders there. I went to school there as a child. The school was set up as a school for Aboriginals, and we were not allowed to go to white schools up until I think it was 1971. So there's a lot of history between what we had to go through. We were actually the old sort of under surveillance by the police. It was very, very hard to go and visit my grandparents in Kempsey, which is Dungari country, and we had to get written permission from the manager of the community, the white manager. So I grew up in the 60s, went to school as an Aboriginal, school for Aboriginals, weren't allowed to speak our language as well. I got a little bit confused with mum and dad. Mum would speak Dungari and dad would speak Bundjalung. We weren't allowed to say it out in public. It was always in the house. So yeah, I had a passion for language as a child, and growing up in an Aboriginal community was unique for me. And grew up with all my cousins. We're all related. I went to school with them till year 10. I studied as a teacher. I was an Aboriginal education officer first. Then I did my teaching part-time. I started teaching in 91 as a primary school teacher. Finished in 2018 as an AP. I was the principal of Cabbage Tree Island. I actually went back to my old school and became the principal of the old school. And I progressed from there, but I also taught as an assistant principal at a nearby community called Evans Head. Always been a unionist, and always a member of the Teachers Federation in New South Wales, a very strong union, and very supportive of Aboriginal education. So that was sort of my journey, but I actually finished in 2018 as a classroom teacher, or AP. I ended up walking into the office of the Aboriginal Outcomes and Partnerships Directorate. We have a directorate in the Department of Education in New South Wales. It's solely specifically for Aboriginal education. And I'm not sure about the other states and territories. I walked in there I was actually working at the New South Wales Teachers Federation as the Aboriginal officer there, relieving Charlene Emerson Boyd, if you might know her. And I walked into the office and I said, "Is there any jobs going?" And they said, "Yeah, there actually is the Language and Cultural Advisor," which I worked in for the first 9 months of the job. And then I applied and got it. I lived in Sydney for a very short time, and then fortunately COVID happened and they moved me back home to Bundjalung country. So, I was very fortunate. And the job that I've been in the job for since 2019, it's actually progressed a fair bit since then. I was the 5th person in 5 years to work in this role. The directorate, we've got a very strong executive director, Aboriginal lady by the name of Karen Jones, who fights hammer and tong for Aboriginal education, and she's a very strong advocate. She's from around the Central Coast, but she's our, since she's come in, I think we've moved on in leaps and bounds. So I'm going to actually share my screen, and I don't want to go through this death by PowerPoint, but I'm going to go through this first part, wherever it is. Now I can't see it. Oh my goodness, where is it? Sorry, I struggled with this too. Can you see the screen? No? Can you see my screen? Oh, shivers. Okay,
When you go share screen, I just learned that if you, then you have to click on it on the actual screen that you want.
Yeah, I can't see the screen I want. I should have gotten rid of it. Anyhow, I'll just briefly talk about it because, look, I work across the whole of New South Wales. We have 5 language nests. We call them language nests. They're located in Bunjalung, Wiradjuri, Gamilarra, Urilawa, Yay. I call it GYY. We've also got Barkindji out at the western Mount Broken Hill, Menindee, and we also work down towards Mildura and on the Victorian border. We also have 2 satellite nests, one in Gomeroi, which is located around Tamworth, and the other one is Dungutty, my mum's country, which is around Kempsey. Now, 5 of those nests are funded. We have 5 Aboriginal teachers from that country or that community that coordinate the language across the state. What they do is they work with principals. We also have a partnership with the New South Wales AECG, the Aboriginal Education Consultative Group, and we base ourselves, I think I'll just flick this up, did I? Can you see this? Can you see my screen? I can't see everybody, so anyhow, what we did was there's a part of the Department of Education is a section called called NESA, and they have developed a scope and sequence. It happened. What they did was they created a scope and sequence that goes from kindergarten or early preschool, prep as you would say in Queensland, early stage 1 to stage 5, which is year 9. What they've done is they've developed a framework with a group of Aboriginal people from around the state and specifically identified areas you would teach in each stage. At the moment, I'll just try and share my screen again. Sorry. There it is here. I think that's it. Oops, no, that's not it. Far out. That's my email. Sorry, I'm not very good at this, so I'm getting better. I'll tell you that I actually, when I started teaching, we never had photocopies. We never had any of that sort of stuff. It was all no technology, no computers. Can you see my screen now? Thumbs up, anybody? Yep. No? Bugger.
You can see the email.
Oh, bugger. I don't want you to see my email.
Yeah, you're right. Your principal's there.
I beg your pardon?
You stop sharing.
I'll stop sharing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll share again. Yeah. And I'll go to the right one. Can you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, this is just an example of what the NESA scope and sequence looks like. This is the Bunjalung language scope and sequence. So what they've done is the group of people have, the NESA have got a group of language speakers, educators together in 2014 or 13 to develop a scope and sequence. What should be taught in each stage of learning. This is in each term. Then you go into term, whoops, I've got to move you guys out of the way. Term 3, look, it's specifically what areas, and this is a framework. We just use it as a framework. It's not set in concrete, and communities can actually develop their own framework using that as a guide. So that's there. Look, NESA has developed it, but also grabbed it as our framework for across the whole state. We want uniform learning across the state. A lot of this is to do with the community ownership as well. We don't say, I don't say that I come from that community, or I don't tell them what to do. They lead the way. We have reference groups at each nest, which comprises of elders, teachers, Aboriginal teachers, educators, and we call them educators. There are people that from the community that go into the schools to teach language. Most of the nests teach Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal kids. There's one nest that doesn't, which is Parkinji or Barkinji, and they requested that they teach their kids first, which is a respect. With a respect, we do that. Yeah. So some of the other things that we've worked on is I have worked with the educators across the state to develop lesson plans, uniform lesson plans, basically. So we're on the same page. We're not. Each of these nests will develop their own lesson plans using the framework, the scope and sequence, and then what we do is I help, and what they do is develop their own resources with the AECG. And I'm sorry, I should go back. The AECG, the New South Wales Aboriginal Education Consultative Group, employ an Aboriginal person in those nests as well as a project officer. So what we do is the SER1s, or the Aboriginal teachers, work with the project officers to develop languages within the schools, and the SER1s, or the senior education officers, work with the principals and the teachers to bring them together. I'll just show you one of the other things that and I hope it works this time. Here's another resource that we've used. And look, this is for the educators basically, so they can go in and teach. We've also worked on, in Bundjalung, we've worked on long and short vowels because the vowels are different in any nation or language. So we've developed our own with respect to the linguists, but I think that's we as a collective, we thought we'll develop our own, and just so that and this is a way, and I've color coded them basically just so that's that not a it's a sound. So we have along here in the next one of the other here we've got a hyperlink which actually attached to all of these slideshows that we use is a hyperlink where you can go in to work on all the vowels, the long, the short, the blends, and it's sort of it's a YouTube clip from a young Aboriginal teacher who explains the vowels. Here you can see the language we've used it quite extensively. Here is our belonging to country, and then we've got the greetings. This is basically kindergarten, early stage 1, sorry, or prep, and then we go into other areas like you know, and it took me quite a while. We've got saltwater, freshwater words as well, because there's a difference with the guys in the hills and compared to us on the coast. So look, it's been an intense journey with these guys. It's been long. I also have worked quite intensively with the educators and the senior education officers. Look, it is a tough and long journey, but I think initially we got the funding through Aboriginal Affairs, New South Wales Aboriginal Affairs, that goes to our directorate, and then our directorate hands some of that money to the New South Wales AECG to employ the educators in the schools. Now, I think we've got over 10,000 children learning language across New South Wales, and I'm probably, that's not even an exaggeration, probably making it a bit, there's probably more kids that are doing it. We haven't, through COVID, we haven't been able to do our reporting on back where how many kids, like the data, which we haven't been able to access because of COVID, and it's gotten worse now. So in New South Wales, so it's going to be probably not till term 4 that our data SharePoint will start back up again. It is a little bit difficult when you're having to teach or work online yeah, it's just difficult. Now we've got also a part of our program was we've also got some more money through our directorate to work on the community languages program, because a lot of parents were saying, well, how come the kids are coming home and speaking the language and we don't know it? So we've given each nest and satellite nest $100,000 to develop community language programs within we call it a nest footprint, and it encompasses towns within the Bundjalung, the Dunghutti, the Goombanga areas. The $100,000 we're looking at, and I'm in the process of working with the SER1s and the project officers to work out how they want to present it in their communities. Some are looking at face-to-face, others looking at online. Some communities like Bundjalung, we've got 10 communities, basically. There's a lot more than that. We had 19 dialects to start with. So we've narrowed down to 10, but we've also got, we've also chosen one common dialect, which is the Western dialect, Western Bundjalung dialect, which we're all using in this area. We've also started working as a pilot program this year with one of the schools in Coffs Harbour. The teacher at Taormina High School is the late teacher there, the language other than English. She's a Goombanga woman, and she teaches Goombanga in the class, in the school. She also does, what we're trying to do is create a pathway for the kids, and I think I heard that mentioned earlier. What we piloted with this year, and hopefully we're going to roll out to other schools, is Year 9 kids learn Cert 1, get a Cert 1 in Year 9. It's accredited through NESA, the Border Studies, the old Border Studies. So they'll get a Cert 1 in Year 9, Cert 2 in Year 10, 3 and 4 in 11 and 12. And that will give them the ability to go out and work and maybe become educators themselves, and also learn the language as they're going. We've got also non-Aboriginal kids learning it as well, but there is specific, the communities say they don't want non-Aboriginal teachers or people teaching it. It's got to come be an Aboriginal person. And I think that's genuine across the board. I'm also going through my SER1s, and we're working on a TAE, training and assessment package for them to teach community as well. And look, the idea with the whole project is we're trying to encourage schools to buy into this program. I think I mentioned to the lady, Eleanor, sorry, you're from ACT, and we had spoke to a assistant principal there a couple of years, 2 years ago, and she wanted language in Queanbeyan. And I said, look, why don't you get your community schools together and combine your money, which they get RAM funding, which is an equity funding through the school system. We do in New South Wales. I'm not sure about the other states and territories, but we have RAM funding, and we're trying to encourage the schools to buy in, to say, look, we'll trade someone to come into our school, pay them adequately, and they can teach the language in the school. I think I've spoken a lot, but there's any questions at the moment, because we also, the language educators, we have acknowledged the prior recognition of language speakers. We still have a few language speakers within communities. Barkindji is very fluent out there. They speak it quite fluently. We have a few in Bundjalung, and we have a place down at Nambucca Heads, Murabai. Have you heard of Murabai Language Centre? They produce some amazing speakers. I think that's where the teacher from Taormina learned. But we've got an amazing gentleman by the name of Michael Jarrett, or Miklo Jarrett, from that community. He's one of my SER1s. Oh, I shouldn't say one of mine, but he's a member of our team, and he is and I heard you talk about TPR earlier, total physical response, which we try and encourage the educators to enforce, put into their classrooms. And we also, with the educators, which we have professional learning for them, we're trying to get it quite regularly, but it seems to, we seem to, because of COVID, it's just all gone backwards, and you know, we've got one next week up here, so it's sort of trying to get the educators, because they're not teachers. We want to try and get them professionally developed so they can go into classrooms, use their skills, and look, the feedback we've been getting from the schools is that they're really wanting it there. I think Gumbaynggirr have 40 schools out of 80 that are doing it. So it's growing and growing. I think it's lucky we've just got it's fortunate we have a very strong director, and the government seems they have got the Premier's priorities, and one of them is keeping kids into year 12, but language and recognition of language is also part of our role. I've also a new member on my team, or our team, Talara Freeman, who is she's the language and culture advisor, but she also works with languages outside the nest. So we've been on a road trip trying to get communities together, have yarn ups, bring schools together, bring community together, so they can start working on it, and getting their own stuff happening in their communities. Because, you know, it's all the northern part of New South Wales seems to be getting all the action, but the southern people in the South Coast and Southern Wiradjuri, we're working with those guys. Anawan up in Armidale, and what's the other one? Durrawal, south of Sydney. So look, it's a big journey, a huge journey, but yeah, thanks guys. It's and I hope I've explained it correctly. Often technology is not my strongest side.
No, that was fantastic. I'm sorry, I just I was so engrossed with what everyone was saying. I just looked at the time and realised that we're
I looked at the time too. Oh, I'm over time.
So I'm going to hand back to Karina. I think we've probably only got time for one maybe question for brief answers. No, please don't go silent. It's engrossing and it's all good. We've got lots of questions up there, and as I said, this is the beginning of a conversation, a long conversation, I think. And it's good to hear what New South Wales is doing, because the system, the structures and the systems around language in New South Wales, in my view, are superior to what is actually non-existent in other parts of the country at the moment. So it
should be a national trend, I reckon.
Oh yeah, I think at least New South Wales has got a structure within the system to support this work. So it was good to hear about the language nest and what's happening with teachers and career pathways and stuff. So Karina, I'll hand the chair back to you.
Thanks, Darcy.
We'll get ready to.
Yeah, we do. Look, it's been a fantastic presentation, so interesting, and I think everyone online will probably forgive us all for the fact that we're not going to get through many questions. But if we can have a couple of really brief responses, we might be able to work through a couple quickly. Some questions that I picked up earlier from one here from Warren was: the language of the land on which I live and work is slowly awakening, but still mostly sleeping. What are the panel's thoughts of teaching an off-country language in the interim until the language of this land is ready to be shared? Perhaps I'll come to Faith and Melinda on that one first of all.
Yeah, I think it's very clear what has to happen in that case. And first of all, it just goes back to consultation with the local community to see what the feelings are. And if sometimes there is consensus and they'll say, yes, this is more appropriate, we can start with that. But yeah, community will let you know.
Yeah. Melinda?
Yep.
Mute. You're on mute.
What we actually did in up in Central Queensland is exactly that. We had one language, the neighbouring language was up and ready to go, but the language of the land on which the school wasn't. We were still working on it. So we got the elders of both those groups and asked if that was okay. And they were very happy to do it. So, and that just goes to show people are very happy. Our mob, they're all very happy to push things forward. So,
yeah. Glenn, you were going to make a contribution, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, look, we do encourage that. Look, we've got lots of, especially in Sydney, a lot of kids from that are off country, and a lot of the schools want to teach their country, Wadradjeri or Bunjalang, but we say, no, you're living on that country. You need to show respect and learn that language. But look, we're looking at online learning for our kids as well and communities. So it's another way of teaching other people, like other languages within other communities. So.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And there's another theme that's run through several of the questions, and that is around the issue of, it emerged very early, I think, around the issue of principals and teachers engaging with elders and local communities. For example, Jennifer says all the issues you've raised regarding implementing language within the school that I work are very relevant, that issue of engaging contact with the community as it's too hard and not wanting to do the right thing. So seeking your perspectives there, we might go to Ellie and then to Neil on this one.
Eleanor?
Yep, sorry, just unmuting.
Yep.
Look, I guess I have a really supportive principal, but they really are, like, he just says, I trust you, you know, go for it. And that's kind of what you need. But they are really gatekeepers, and they are the, you know, the people that can say yes or no, and that's kind of it generally. He always looks, I work alongside a auntie, a Ghana woman, Auntie Jenny, and he always looks to us and asks us the question about community and engaging with parents and families. But I know that not everyone has that relationship. But the thing with those community relationships is they're vital. They're not a maybe thing, and they have to be genuine, and you have to put the time in.
Yeah. Thanks, Ellie. Tanil?
Yeah, look, I would say exactly what Eleanor just said. You know, there's a situation where in Roma, so just to give you a bit of background, when kids get to year 10 in Mitchell, they need to travel an hour to Roma to complete their high schooling. So a lot of the kids want to continue, you know, to learn language. And, you know, we're currently in negotiations with the Manandangi people, you know, to try and get permission to teach Gungari language on Manandangi country. So I guess we're going through exactly the same processes as anyone else. You know, Des and I still, you know, have to go along and do the same consultation as anyone. And the question, just in relation to the question before, you know, I guess a lot of the time we're probably teaching the neighbouring language anyway, because there's so many shared words. You know, there's dialect chains that run in Queensland, you know, west to east. So, but we in the past have had elders get together, and they've decided that it's okay to share those shared, you know, language words.
Thanks, Janelle. There's one more question here, which I think might come to you, Faith, on and Melinda, and that is the issue of non-Aboriginal linguists pushing out Aboriginal people in this space. What your thoughts might be there?
Yeah, there's actually a really big change happening because the history of a lot of language document, obviously it wasn't a written language. So non-Indigenous linguists and anthropologists were busy for many years recording the languages, and it's left them with a sense of ownership that now as the strength is coming back to communities, we're hearing it everywhere. It's going, that's not the way we said it. This is the way we want to say it. That's not the way we want to write it. This is the way we want to write it. So there's a bit of negotiation happening there. Well, a bit of understanding on the part of the non-Indigenous linguists that that time's changing now, and the work's being done by the communities.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really good to go back to those old recordings, you know, and seek some clarification. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why we've developed our own vowels and short and long vowels, because we use that as a base, but we're going to develop our own. We own it then, not linguists.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the way that the linguists recorded the words it doesn't make sense. You know, it comes from a whole different learning structure and a way of writing things that people just don't understand. It's not intuitive. And so this is what our communities are doing, is recording it our own ways.
Thank you. Thanks, Faith. And I've got a final question. It's really, it's from me, actually. And that is, you know, one of the themes that I've picked up tonight is the role, or the lack of the role, of the system in terms of this. I mean, you know, many of your contributions have been about what's happening at a local level and, you know, the incredible work that's happening. But, you know, if you had one message for governments about how important this work is and that role in terms of the system and the funding and resourcing of this, what would it be? So I'm going to come to each of you. I'll start with you, Faith, because you're at the top of my screen.
The message to government is it's time. You know, we've been asking for long enough. They've spent too long ignoring the whole problem, but it won't go away now. Everyone in Australia does know about the importance of language, and there's a great groundswell. So governments can't ignore it. It's time to properly fund the reinstatement of languages. Thanks. And to you, Glenn?
Oh, I'm exactly the same. Like, if you lobby the government enough, I think, and your local members, you're going to get results. And I think we just had a strong director in our directorate that pushes for that sort of progress.
Yeah, thank you. And Melinda, what do you think?
Well, I'm at the end of the journey, really, fighting for languages. And we've been doing it for such an awful long time. So I'm just hoping that all our young people are really going to push forward now that everybody's laid the groundwork for us to go ahead and start owning what we own of this country and making sure that it is instilled upon our children.
Thank you, Melinda. And Tanil?
Yeah, just you know, really the same as what Auntie Lynette Nixon said. You know, we need to, you know, lobby our federal and state governments, and so that we can continue to do the work that we do. Yeah, funding is just so important. You know, it's just not sustainable. I know it's not. My situation is not sustainable. And, you know, I need, flexible working, you know, agreements until there comes a time where, you know, there's, you know, I can count the speakers on two hands at least.
Thank you. And Ellie.
Yeah, exactly what the rest of the panel has said. And also, you know, in funding it in the right way. So putting money into community, into Aboriginal teachers, and not just saying we want First Nations languages in schools, but actually taking the time to understand how that actually works and what community want is really important.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ellie. Darcel, did you want to make a final contribution as well?
I just, excuse me, wanted to say thank you very much to all of the participants tonight, and in particular to our panellists. I do want to acknowledge and recognise that this has been a journey and a dream of our elders for a very, very, very long time. We acknowledge the work of Linda and Faith and all of the people and Uncle Glenn, all of the people who've journeyed before us in this space. And you're right, it's time for some of us younger people, although someone called me auntie at the health service the other day. I said, I don't know whether that's like
being called auntie, don't you worry, that many times. It's like, I might have done my grey hair, I think.
Anyway, it is time for those of us who are you know, it's time for all of us to step up. Anyone who's got a contribution to make should be making that contribution. That's
Can I invite anyone that is interested in what we're doing in New South Wales? Come down. I'm in Ballina. I live in Ballina. I work in Lismore. Be close enough, you know, and I could take you. I could go through what we're doing here.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you very much for the
That'd be
invitation.
great.
Yeah, thank you. So colleagues, thank you for joining our webinar tonight. On behalf of our union, I want to say it's been our privilege to walk and to learn together on this critically important issue. And it's certainly from our perspective, we are so pleased to have been able to present this webinar tonight and also to partner with First Languages Australia, and I recognise the outstanding contributions of all of our panellists. I think we really do have some challenges here about how we actually measure the value and the work and the knowledge of the elders in our communities in this space in terms of first languages, and also the industrial and professional support that is needed and the mechanisms that are needed to be put in place to ensure that first languages have their rightful place in Australia. So on that note, I'll say we're up for the challenge and we're very pleased to work with all of you in terms of achieving this. And just want to say thank you, Darcel, for your work in putting this webinar series together. Again, thank you and good evening.
Good evening.